Hey, Cade.
Yo!
I went yard selling this weekend and bought a bunch of junk to make a makerspace in my classroom.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. Come on over, please. I need help.
Hang on. First of all, can I bring my glue gun?
You know glue guns are always welcome.
Oh, sweet.
Welcome to Across the Hall, a podcast sharing ELA strategies from one door away, with your hosts, Cade Summers and Michelle Shelton. This is episode 4, Maker Mindset. Woo! It has been a crazy week and a half.
Yes, it has. School has started.
Yes, so since our last episode, and the reason there's been such a long time between episodes is that school started back. And so we are now on day 5 of having students back in the classroom.
Yep, we're ready for May, right?
We're ready for May. The countdown begins.
Yeah. I'm enjoying my classes. In all seriousness, things have changed a little bit this year. I teach 2 standard English 10, 3 pre-AP English 10, and just a bunch of really great kids and a whole lot of really great mindsets ready to learn.
You have some online classes too.
Yeah, I'm teaching a couple of 10th grade online classes, so going to be a really great year.
That is awesome. I'm teaching English 9 and pre-AP 9 and looking forward to it, kidding about counting down to May because we love our job. As a matter of fact, I think Cade might have been singing a little song today about how much he loves his job.
All right. Pardon any kind of cuss words that are in the song, but there's a song, and right now, do you remember who it's by? It goes, oh, ho, ho.
Dirty Heads, or is that correct?
Something like, I feel like I'm on vacation because I love my occupation.
Yeah, don't get him singing. It can be bad. But anyway, yeah, so we're on day 5 of classes with kids and kind of taking everything that we learned over the summer and trying to begin implementing that. And so as we were getting ready to work on this next episode, on episode 4, we decided to try to talk about makerspaces, because makerspaces is something that we hear a lot about, but not something that we know a lot about. And so as we started to get ready for this, we decided that we might need to consult someone else.
Right. There are a lot of really great resources on makerspaces, and one of those sources has a podcast. His name's John Spencer. He is a former high school English teacher, I believe, but now a college professor. He's got a website, a podcast that I'd really recommend, and we'll make sure to link that in the show notes. But I learned a lot just by listening to a few of his episodes over the summer and then going to his website and receiving some information by actually signing up on his email list about the types of things that you might put in your classroom as part of a makerspace. And what was really encouraging to me, and I've tried to already embody this in the new school year, is that he kind of comforted me, so to speak, because he said it took him about 5 years of classroom practice to finally get his makerspace the way he wanted it to be. So if there's anything that, in my opinion, about makerspaces that's really encouraging and assuring, it's that you don't have to turn the world upside down in your classroom to get the idea of design thinking and making started pretty early. And I think even Michelle, and I know it's the case with me, we started some new things already this year. Like I didn't start my school year out exactly the same way I did last year. What about you?
Right, no, not at all. We have been really trying to wrap our minds around design thinking. This is something that's new for us, the whole concept of design thinking and maker spaces and making in the English classroom in general, trying to figure out how to bring that in. So I've seen all these wonderful ideas on Twitter for how people are using maker spaces and design thinking in their science classrooms and in their math classrooms, but English, I had no idea how to even bring that in. So that's what this episode is about.
Right. And so we're excited that we're going to have an interview today with an expert in makerspaces, and his name is Dan Ryder from northern Maine.
Northern Maine.
It's a pretty far distance from
Oxford, Alabama.
Yep. Excellent way of emphasizing the accent there, Michelle.
Yeah, no, emphasizing. I like that you are assuming this is not normally my accent.
So we're continuing this really great streak of awesome interviewees with folks like Anna Hodges from Common Lit and Joey Tarleson from Flipgrid, and now it's Dan Ryder. He's got a new book coming out, and he's going to tell us a little bit about that in this episode, as well as the process that he went through, including with some work with IDEO in developing his maker mindset and the maker mindsets of folks in his class.
All right, so here we go.
Dan Ryder is with us. He is an educator, improviser, and design thinker. We appreciate Dan being with us today. Dan, you can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about, why Laura Fleming would have recommended you and how you know her.
One, thanks for having me. And two, I don't know why Laura Fleming would have possibly recommended, because my name shouldn't even be breathed in the same breath as hers. Like what she does is amazing, and I'm in constant awe of her all the time. Yeah. But I'm inclined to think the reason why she said, "Hey, if I can't make it, get this guy from the AA minor leagues to come in, help out."
That way, whenever she does come on the show, it'll make her look really good. Is that what it is?
Right. It'll be like, this is why we've been waiting. Let's start with this. I've been an English teacher for 20 years at the same high school here in western rural Maine. I've taught at Mount Blue High School that whole time. Taught 9th through 12th. I've taught everything from the most struggling freshmen through the AP Lit seniors. And at various times in my career, everything in between. I've co-founded a humanities program. We piloted a student-led class called PACE, which was intended to allow students to set their own learning goals and own pathways through the sophomore year curriculum, through the 4 core classes. I've been in part of a variety of other initiatives and movements on campus, customized learning, the movement towards proficiency-based, standards-based grading, all sorts of that kind of progressive education stuff has been pretty much characteristic for me through my whole teaching career. What's happened for the last 5 years especially was I made a transition from a project-based learning classroom to what I call a design thinking lab classroom. And the key difference there is a few years ago, a buddy of mine at school, we put a ton of energy into project-based learning, and we loved it. We loved the frameworks, essential questions, driving inquiry, students focusing not on tests, but on making a product, these sorts of things. But what we were finding is that, especially what I was finding, was at the end of the day, I still kept getting dumpster projects. They were meeting the standards. They were fulfilling the criteria on a rubric, but those rubrics were saying things like, uses exceptional color, is big, looks well made, things like that. And there wasn't as emphasis on the content. Like, it was very numerical so that we could easily count, like uses 7 examples, uses 4 examples, but nothing about the quality of the example, right? It might say effective, but there was something missing because kids were making stuff and I was looking at it and I was still throwing it away. There wasn't a desire to keep most of it. And the stuff that we did want to keep was really aesthetic. It was really because it was pretty. It wasn't necessarily any better explaining the concept than the ugly thing. It just looked like they spent more time on it. And there was this massive disconnect between the learning that we wanted them to be able to demonstrate, the content, and then what we were having them do. So like project-based, which was supposed to be not a panacea, but was supposed to like elevate. Well, yeah, it elevated us away from tests, but just like a kid throws a test away, they were throwing the projects away because there's no reason to keep them unless they were pretty, right? And the learning went right in the trash can with it. I was super guilty of doing this. And then one night on Twitter, I discovered design thinking. At the DTK12 chat family, their hashtag DTK12 chat for all the listeners. And I became an instant convert, and because it shifts from being about the project to being about solving problems. And it shifts from being about turning something in on time to meeting the needs of others. And it's about empathy. And that's the key to design thinking. It's empathy-fueled, human-centered problem solving. So suddenly, which is a cliche to say, but suddenly my brain just did this like inside out to, oh, we could be making things that matter to demonstrate that I understand this novel. We could be making things that matter to demonstrate our understanding of poetry. We could be making things that matter to understand these dramatic concepts, or understand this historical notion that we need in the humanities class, or to whatever the content is, whatever that standard is, we could be designing and designing solutions to problems that are related directly to the content. And once I got my head wrapped around that, everything else kind of took off. And that's where making and the idea of turning my classroom into a design lab and a makerspace, to borrow, to use that terminology, really like blossomed. And that's what I've been doing for the past 5 years.
Right. That's awesome. So whenever you did finally have that epiphany, where did you start?
So my very first design challenge was I had my students redesign my classroom.
Oh.
So I didn't start with content. I started with, because I was new to design thinking, and at that time I was still under the impression that I now realize for myself is a false impression, that design thinking is a process. That design thinking is a step-by-step, you go this, and this. Because I was still equating design thinking with project-based learning. And so much about PBL is you get this framework for the steps in the process, right? And you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or whichever brand you're using, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, 8, 9, 17, whatever it is.
Right.
And because there were brands of design thinking, I thought it was the same thing.
That as well, because a lot of times whenever you look up design thinking and you're trying to study about it, it'll have it in a graph that makes it look like it's supposed to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Exactly, right? And you see that everywhere. And that's part of the narrative of design thinking that I am part of trying to shift and change, especially when talking to educators, because I see design thinking is truly about thinking, and it's about a posture for thinking. It's a set of postures you take to develop this mindset into problem solving that starts with empathy and never really ends, because it starts with empathy and it's cyclical and it's recursive, and you have to keep going through these postures and these thinkings. But at that time, to go back to the original question, was what did we do first? Well, we did the classroom design because I wanted to use the steps. I wanted to follow the steps and to get myself familiar with design thinking. So I use Mary Cantwell's deep design thinking process. And you can find out about that particular process on deepdesignthinking.com. And you can follow her at SciTechieEDU on the Twitterverse. She's fantastic. I don't think I mentioned, I'm at Wicked Decent on the Twitters as well. But I wanted to follow hers because it was only 4 steps. And she designed it for use with 2nd and 3rd graders. And I'm like, well, if 2nd and 3rd graders can handle learning this process, then my AP Lit students might do okay with it.
Yeah.
And I don't even mean that facetiously. they're like, hey, I want to do it my own way. I'm like, wait, we've got 4, it's just 4 steps, guys. Stay with me for 4 steps.
4 steps. You can do this.
But then we could do it, we could do it with any of my students. And that's what we did. We redesigned the classroom. We started with discovery. So that's step one in deep design, is you learn everything you can about the space. So when they came into my classroom, I had all of my stuff up against the wall. I just had a pile of chairs for them to sit in. So what do you know about the class so far? What do you know about English? You know, we used some tools to get us through this. Then we had to do empathy work. So they had to figure out what each other wants in a classroom, in a learning environment. They had to find out what my needs are. They had to find out if there were any rules or requirements that the school needs, so that we're meeting all of the needs of the collective users. We developed a composite user profile, meaning like if you just had this like kind of average user of the room, what would they be like? And then we experimented with doodles and drawings and using Lego and a whole bunch of different manipulatives and junk that was laying around to build models. Then we went through a process of kind of taking the best ideas from different classes, because all my classes worked on it together. That was probably the hardest part, was finding a way so that everyone felt like they're getting ownership.
If you don't mind, I'm going to ask you a question here. So you're referring to the Legos and whatever you said, manipulatives. You're building a model of what your classroom would look like. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yep. Okay. That's exactly it. Yeah, we told it, like, they built up all sorts of three-dimensional models, right? Because if they just draw it, well, one, every kid who's like, I can't draw, is already feeling like they're not, like, what's the point? Which is silly. It's a doodle. Like, it's okay, guys. It's like, I'm not assessing the doodle. The first question is always, is this count? It's like, well, it's your classroom, so yes, it counts. Like, it matters.
Rethink all the stress that I put myself through getting my classroom together. I could have just let the kids do it.
Right. That's essential. So that's essentially what ended up happening. They built them up, but then you could actually look and see, like, from different angles, and kids could see, like, wow, all of your stuff is like piled up in this corner, right? Like, what's that going to be like when we actually do it with the real stuff? The kids made interesting discoveries through the course of using the physical things, because one, they were getting better spatial reasoning figured out, but they were also able to have a conversation around something they could touch and hold. And there's something very powerful about that makes it a much more intimate experience in a human-to-human way. When you're working around a model and you're using a model. So I think it's why architects build them. But just through that process allowed them to have a richer conversation. But for me as a teacher, I immediately saw my kids who I did not know. Remember, this is like day one. Like, this was like day one of school. We're doing this stuff. Like, the first 2 weeks of school, we're just designing the classroom. I was able to see who can think outside the box, you know, who's a divergent thinker, who's a convergent thinker, who can work well with others, who is an introvert, who's an extrovert. I mean, I didn't use this as my only metric, you know, to define the rest of the year, but I immediately got a sense. I got a sense of who the leaders were, who the positive disruptors were, who the negative disruptors were, who was going to be game on, who's game off, who are arts and craftsy folk, who are the opposite, who you know, I got a real strong sense of the personalities of my students, much richer than, you know, fill out this survey, you know, like the student interest survey, which I had done for years. Yeah. And I don't do them anymore because I get so much more information by doing things.
So our podcast is all about how to use different things in the English classroom. I know you've been teaching for English for a really long time. So how are some ways that you've used makerspaces, design thinking to teach standards for ELA?
So I've got a bunch of examples that I like to go to as my go-tos. And the first one is with Of Mice and Men. I have my students do Of Mice and Tiny Houses as our unit. So what they design are scale models of tiny houses, following the principles of sustainable design, of the tiny house movement. They have to investigate and do an inquiry piece to understand what tiny houses are, what separates them from a typical house, what are the sizes and the space constraints that are associated with those, what are the principles that people live by when they live in a tiny house. And then they have to apply all that knowledge that they acquire to meeting the needs of Lenny and George and Crooks and Candy from Of Mice and Men. And I let them pick which of the characters they want to focus on, whose needs they want to meet. I think I'm at the last iteration of the rubric. I said exceeding the standard was actually meeting 4 sets of needs, because that demonstrated to me a deeper understanding of the text.
Right.
Because if you can extrapolate what Candy needs and see that that's different from what Crook's needs, then you get the literal understanding of the text, but also, like, where are the nuances? Like, how do you understand that an African American from the 1930s is going to want, like, private space, as Crook says, but also time to commune with the others as clearly he wants, right? So, I really want them to be able to design for all 4, right? To really, like, take it to the next level. And can you figure out a way to do that? And they came up with amazing designs.
So what kind of supplies did you need in your room in order for them to be able to do that?
So this was all done on a shoestring. We used leftover cardboard from our cardboard challenge. The kids were encouraged to find material from home and bring it in. But I do everything on my maker carts. My maker carts, by the way, are reclaimed AV carts from our building renovation when they got rid of a whole bunch of stuff and they got rid of a bunch of TVs and VCRs and stuff. And I just went to the surplus where these things were in storage and brought them back. So I've got like 4 or 5 just of varying sizes, these rolling carts in my room. And they're covered with stuff from our local recycling center. We have they call it Everyone's Resource Depot at the University of Maine at Farmington. And it's similar to, there's a place called Maine Share. You find them often at children's museums, places where you can go and buy recycled stuff for like pennies and use it for arts and crafts, right? So you can get shoelaces and buttons and weird overruns from factories and stuff that send leftovers. We have a wood turning mill up the road, and so we get lots of little dowel bits and these strange things. So for like $20, I can, like, $20 a semester, I've got more stuff than we're going to use.
Oh, wow.
And then I'm a pack rat. Like, anything I find that I think, oh, that's a neat bit, that's a weird, neat thing to have, let's just use it. Let's throw that on the cart. All my kids, like my own kids, Happy Meal toys end up on the maker cart. Busted toys end up on the maker cart. Old parts of games end up on the maker cart. So you don't have to spend a lot of money. You don't need any budget. We did all those prototypes. Some of them came out looking gorgeous, but all I cared is that they were built to scale, because I wanted to have that math piece in there. And tiny houses are so important. Like, scale matters, right? Like, it's inherent. Otherwise, it's not a tiny house. So they had to build them to scale, but they picked the scale they wanted to build at. So they chose their scale, and kids came in with stuff made from foam board that they went and bought, and I chastised them. Said, "Why did you buy foam board? Like, it's a school project." I'm like, "That's crazy! You spent $12. Like, why? Like, there's all this leftover cardboard over here." One kid insisted on painting it. I said, "Why are you painting it?" And she said, "Because it should be painted." I go, "Well, what color?" And she went, I said, "This better be intentional. If you're going to take all that time to paint this thing, why are you going to paint it the color you're going to paint it?" "Well, this is the only colors I have." I'm like, "Then that's silly. That's not worth your time. You've got to choose a color that's going to add meaning to the project." And that's something that I try to instill with my students all the time, is make a deliberate, intentional choice.
Right. So So what is another thing that you've done in your English?
So I love doing design labs around poetry.
Oh, cool.
So we'll ask like a question like, how might we demonstrate the power of this poem through Lego? How might we demonstrate the power of this poem through these 4 items on your desk? How might we, one of my labs is called Shape of a Sonnet. So they have to take a sonnet of their choice. Usually like we've been studying a couple, right? So it's nice to do like a little kind of more traditional analysis work for a couple of sonnets. And then I'll say, all right, read these 4 sonnets tonight, break them down yourself, use our analytical tools that you know how to do. We're going to be doing something with them next class. And they come in next class having done the thinking, and then I take them through the design process. They've discovered about the poem. I use that deep design process again. So they've discovered the poem, they've understood about the poem. Then they do some empathy work, and the way they do empathy work is they interview each other, and they find out what the other people in the class saw in the poem. And so that they might uncover things that they missed, that when they're thinking about how they might articulate those ideas, that they capture it all. And then during the discovery work is also when I let them know what their materials are going to be. If I'm going to give them any sort of a constraint. So I might say everything on this cart, and that cart might include all of the maker materials, or it might just include buttons, shoelaces, and dominoes. Like it might just be that. It might be a pile of markers and a bunch of old toilet paper tubes and dental floss and a package of Oreos. that might be what's there. Then they go through an experiment phase where they sketch and they doodle and they play around. And then I give them like, all right, now you got time to build your prototype. And what they have to demonstrate in the prototype is they have to show me the structure they have to build a structure that mirrors the structure of the sonnet. And they have to be able to emphasize the volta, the turn in the poem, because that's what, one of those key elements of the sonnet, right? It's where the however that sonnet is rhetorically designed, that's where there's that shift. So they have to show me where that shift is through their model. They build, they create, they design the whole thing, and then at the end they make a video where they do a walkthrough explaining it. And I should say, and I didn't mention this earlier when talking about mice in tiny houses, for all of these things, I have them, any of our making labs, they have to complete an intention map at the end. And the intention map is where they use photo documentation by taking pics. We're a one-to-one Mac Air school, so we have technology available readily to every kid. And they take pictures, document their learning. They don't have to take a picture. They could just handwrite in or describe the design element, what that shows, text evidence that links between the design element and the text that they're working with, and an explanation of how how that design element demonstrates your understanding of that text. And the last part of the map is where I ask them to explain what they would do in a future iteration, right? Like if you had longer, if you could go back to it again. So that way I am not doing the thinking for them, and I'm not doing that whole like, this is so cool, and then realizing the emperor has no clothes, they just made something pretty.
Can you, I know this is really off the cuff, but as far as like, can you think of an example that you could physically describe, maybe associated with a poem that you have seen the students do? Like what would that look like?
Okay, so one of my students worked, I wish I could remember which exact poem she worked with. I want to say Whoso Lists to Hunt. I believe that's the piece she worked with. She used a little champagne, like a plastic champagne glass that we had left over from our Dallowinian party. We had a dinner party where you had to play characters inspired by characters from Mrs. Dalloway and from The Hours. And so someone had brought champagne glasses for this party. So she had those, and then she had a Lego horse inside to represent the deer in the poem. And then she had a Lego person on top. She had these glass beads around the outside, and the volta was there was something else at the bottom because the glass was on top of this other base, and the volta was where the plastic met the other piece, and that was where, and the idea was everything hinged on that turn. And visually the two things, and I can shoot you the links. I've got pictures of that somewhere, but that was like, you know, it involved glass beads and marbles and a plastic champagne glass and a distinctively dog chewed Lego horse, and I'm pretty sure that was Who So Lists to Hunt, because there's also an anthem for the Doomed Youth by Wilfred Owen. Was another that another student made, but I think that one was like more two-dimensional. Like it was just, she like used the whole top of the desk, and rather than building vertical like this one, it went like horizontal, but it was a really like a 2D piece. And I'm pretty sure she used like busted up pieces of like wood and other scraps to show the fracture, you know, the fracture between the before and the after in that poem. And that the closing sextet, that was the other thing I was telling, like, how is this poem broken out? Is it an octave and a sestet? Is it quatrains? Like show me. I want to see all of the meaningful structures. How is that thing arranged? So that's the other reason that building allows that to happen too.
It sounds like it would be a lot of fun for teachers as well, just to get to see the great ideas that the kids can come up with and how creative they can be.
I love it. Like, it's so cool when you like walk away for 2 minutes, especially with kids that you don't think get it. Like the kid that has been kind of like, you know, they kind of got that glazed over day-old donut look on their face, and they're right, and they're good humans. They're just struggling. You know, and you walk away and you come back like, what is this? And when they start explaining it to you, and you subtly pull out your phone and you start periscoping it, and then at the end you hit save, and then you say, the world just heard you explain it. And then when they're like horrified, then but when their minds are blown, they're like, then, you know, there's that look on their face, that like pure like pride. I rarely saw pride in a thing that a kid made before I started doing this type of work with them. Every kid has the opportunity to be successful with it. And I couldn't always say that about all the other stuff I used to do.
Do you find that there are kids, especially like considering a school or a classroom where this has not been practiced very much? It seems so out of the box and so untraditional that the students themselves aren't used to. Do you ever find students who maybe don't consider themselves kinesthetically inclined, or you know, the hands-on element it seems so foreign to them that this is not the way that you academically approach a poem or a story or something like that? Is there an adaptation of the makerspace that is less building something and more, I don't know, a different way of connecting to those types of kids that aren't the hands-on, you know, the traditional hands-on? Or do you find that this is something that makes them reach to something new and eventually does make that connection? How do you?
Yeah. Yes and yes.
Okay.
So a kid dropped my class after the first week a couple of years ago and says, this is just glorified arts and crafts.
Oh.
And I said, yep, that's exactly what it is. It is glorified arts and crafts, and you are going to be miserable in here. And this, oh, hey, I made it all the way to now without plugging my book. So I co-wrote a book called Intention, Critical Creativity in the Classroom. with my super good friend Amy Burball, and it just came out this summer. Just came out in June from EdTech Team Press, and you can get it on Amazon. Just look up Dan Ryder Intention. Bing, there it is.
There it is.
You can also get the EdTech Team website. But if you're a Prime member, free shipping. Yay! What?
Go Prime.
But the reason I bring up the book is a major premise of the book is the idea of you've got to look at and see what you're actually assessing, what you actually want students to know, right? So that's what allows you to have multiple pathways in your classroom. So I always have students who go, can't I just write an essay? And I go, yeah, you can. You can write it. Yes. You can demonstrate on the final product. If you want to demonstrate your understanding of the concepts we are exploring through a written piece, go for it. If you want to describe in exact detail what that tiny house would look like that you design, and you want to do that all through text, go for it. You still got, well, can I just write an essay about the characters? Well, what's your essay going to be about? What are you going to demonstrate to me? This is what I need to know. I need to know that you understand the character. And once I lay out the actual expectations, it's shocking how few of them actually want to follow those traditional pathways that they
me the
see
glitter glue.
Better.
What is it? Yeah. Right? Lego movie reference, sorry.
Right? But that's not to say I don't teach them to write, right? Like I do. They do reflective essays afterwards where they describe their process, they discuss what they would do differently. I have them do a bunch of different analysis type prompts over the space of the year where they reflect on what they've done. Our writing curriculum especially for ninth graders is more focused on narrative writing. So they tell the story of how they went about doing their project. And they have to work in elements of conflict and, have a point of view and have a voice and all these good things that make good story. But that's really that's where that's where writing is going in general anyway, is because it's where it should go. Unless you're going to be an English professor, the chances of you needing to do a literary analysis are slim and none in the actual world. And not, again, if you want to do that, awesome, follow that pathway. You should do that. And when you're an AP Lit, you will write analytical essays and you'll be all set. But when I'm working with my ninth graders who have all sorts of different life directions ahead of them, telling a good story is going to be the most important. But yeah, to make sure I answered the question fully, like, it is important that I offer every kid at least some choices. But yeah, those are just some examples of what I do. And truly, this is a plug, but that's what the book Amy and I wrote is the front half of it is 1/3 of the philosophy, right? It's the philosophy behind critical creativity and rigorous whimsy, the idea of being playful and doing it with meaning and purpose to demonstrate deeper understanding through acts of creating and creative expression. But the second 2/3 of that book is what we call our catalog of creativity. And it's 40 plus activities categorized that you can use in any content area, from health and physical education, right through world languages, through ELA, through math, through science. We lay it out for you, which ones we think are particularly great for each. We give suggestions on how to do them. We don't call them lesson plans. We call them pathways because they're just one way you could go about doing it. But if you like things that are scripted, there's a script you can follow. There's tons of examples. We have things for creating with the body, things for creating with stuff, things for creating with others, things for creating with images, with print, with music. So it's we really see that there are tons of opportunities just sitting right there waiting for us, and they're not high tech either. Like you can augment a lot of it with tech, but you can do a lot in analog, and then you can use the tech to document it. And then the tech really becomes about helping kids to articulate their understanding and capture their understanding. And in some cases, help them create their understanding. But more often than not, the things just around us in our day-to-day give us tons of opportunity to be creative and to make, right? Because making isn't necessarily about about needing a bunch of equipment. Making is about the act of creation.
So tell us one more time what the name of your book is and how to find you on Twitter.
So, name of the book is Intention, Critical Creativity in the Classroom by Dan Ryder and Amy Burvall, published by EdTech Team Press. They're the folks who put on Google Summits, if you're familiar. So we are in really great company, and it's like super exciting to have our book as part of their lineup, because there's some just fantastic work that they've put out. And you can find it on Amazon. You can find it on edtechteampress.com. And my Twitter handle and Instagram handle and Medium handle is @WickedDecent. Wicked, like as in things are wicked scary, and decent as in things are decent. That's the Mainer in me. So Wicked Decent on Twitter, and I live on Twitter, so I'm easy to find there. And I hope people follow me and connect with me and holler back and ask questions, because I love this stuff. It's my passion. We need more good content out there in the world, right?
All right, guys. You noticed probably that Dan has all kinds of really great ideas about how to make your classroom a makerspace. And it's not really just about making the makerspace, but instead it's more about developing the mindset in the students that will eventually result in the high-quality makerspaces that you hear about in podcasts and on various educational websites and in literature. What Dan just did as an English teacher, among various other things, he is extraordinary, is tell you guys what makerspaces can look like and the maker mindset can look like in the ELA classroom. So Michelle and I tend to use this segment at the end of an interview to talk about how we would do it in the ELA classroom. But today, rather than trying to act like experts, what we want to do is to tell you a little bit about our process, because we figure that a lot of people in our audience are at various levels in the spectrum, but largely many of you guys are experimenting as we are, and we are not all Dan Ryders.
For sure.
Yeah, and we're not all John Spencers, who wrote the book Launch, and we're not all, these makerspace authors. So, Michelle, how would you say that we really got started talking about makerspaces?
Well, our principal, Heath Harmon at Oxford High School, has had some great ideas. He's very innovative and really pushes the envelope and tries to challenge us to push the envelope ourselves. And one of the things that he's done is create a teacher innovation station. And in this teacher innovation station, he has a makerspace for us with all of these different materials that we can use to create. And then over the summer, we also had one of our colleagues, Teresa Shadricks, who got to go to San Francisco as a fellow in the Teachers Guild for Audio. And so she comes back and is talking about design thinking, and she's so excited that it just makes us want to learn how to use this in our classroom.
Right. In fact, speaking of teacher innovation stations, we now have a recording studio of sorts in our teacher innovation station. So even our podcast is evolving because of some of the support that we get from our school system and that creative thought process. I was thinking about what's in here, though, Michelle, and how that so many teachers here, including you and I, are so clueless. We open up a couple cabinets, and we've got baskets and baskets full of glitter and ribbon and markers and saran wrap and colored pencils and styrofoam balls and styrofoam sticks and dowel rods and buttons and vinyl letters and all of these different things, markers and Post-its, and just the list goes on, because somebody obviously has been given the duty of looking up all these makerspace items that could be purchased off of the internet or at Walmart. And you walk in and you look there, or you see teachers look there, and it's somewhat overwhelming.
It is overwhelming.
Where do you start? A lot of people, I think, over the summer, I'm like, I need to get all these things for my classroom, but then I wouldn't know what to do. So
right.
the place to start is where?
I think what Dan said is finding some recycled things, some things that you can get for free until you figure out what you're doing.
But even then, again, and Dan made me think about this. I mean, where do you start? And so you get all the stuff, which we've gotten, and it's caused me to look again. And every time I come in the room, I look, but I have not grabbed some of these things. I grab the expo markers and I write on our new dry erase wall that I can write from ceiling to floor or whatever. And so I'm learning to use that. I'm learning to use the Post-it notes that are available and that sort of thing. But styrofoam balls and popsicle sticks, at what point will I realize that? And I don't think it's a overnight sort of thing. And I don't think it's just a hit you in the face sort of thing. But I'm glad they've purchased these items so that constant exposure might eventually get us to the point where we realize during the brainstorming or challenge phase, we can start making the connection of, oh, I can actually design something to solve this or to model this. And I think you've gotten that started in your classroom already, haven't you, this year?
Yes. So where I started was actually when Kate and I were talking about this podcast and trying to really wrap our minds around the idea behind design thinking and makerspaces and how we really might use that in our classrooms. So being that we love collaborating with one another and with other of our coworkers, we were sitting in this beautiful podcast room that we now have and trying and kind of struggling because neither one of us has ever done anything with design thinking. And up walks Teresa Shadracks, who is our on-campus guru of design thinking, I guess. And so she basically tutored us and we collaborated on what design thinking is. And so we started with the novel that we're about to be teaching and the unit that we're about to cover. So I'm going to be covering a unit called Heroes and Social Injustice as we're reading To Kill a Mockingbird and some other texts. And so we started there. We started with the curriculum and thought, how can I bring design thinking into this so that my kids can create and think critically and build prototypes and try to solve a problem or try to meet a challenge. And so we started there, and she really just kind of walked us through those steps of what design thinking is, and then the makerspaces kind of just end up coming along with that.
Yeah, so in the interview, I noticed that Dan said there's all kinds of different models for the design thinking process, and I think he referenced one that's a 4-step model. The one that Teresa Shadracks has kind of informed us about through her experience with IDEO is what? There's 5 steps to it, right?
Yes, it's empathy, or you might call it discovery, define, ideate, prototype, and test. So in my class right now, we're in the empathy phase as we are trying to get our minds wrapped around this challenge that I've given them.
And I like the fact that it begins with some content that or from which you can spark ideas, spark thinking about something that is relevant in the real world. It's important. I was just looking at a website recently about quality questions, and there were 3 circles. You had, in asking a question, you had the content or the text that you might be reading. You had also the individual that you might be asking, and then you had the real world. Those were the 3 circles. And what you want to do in asking quality questions is to have a circle that reaches all of those 3. And that would be the type of question. So we want, in other words, to connect the student to a text where he or she feels personally connected to it. But for that deeper level understanding, we want them connecting to the text in the context of some real world challenge. And theme and that sort of thing. So you've been talking about justice and injustice.
Yes. So we came up with the challenge, and I say we because the 3 of us had this conversation and we're collaborating, so it definitely was not all me. But we came up with this challenge of getting my 9th graders to create a modern Justice League, because we have this title of Heroes and Social Injustice. So we're trying to engage these 14 and 15-year-olds. And so they're going to come up with, the challenge is for them to create a modern Justice League that will be able to save people that are facing social injustices today. So that's where we are. We're in the empathy phase where they are researching. They're reading about social injustice. They're reading about what's going on in America, what's going on in other countries, and how groups of people are being treated unfairly. And that's where we are. And so we're moving toward that prototype phase, which is what the students want. They're so excited. They're already asking questions like, well, my prototype look like? And I said, we're not there yet. Hold on a minute. First, we have to figure out who it is we're serving and what their needs are. So in the very beginning, we defined hero, we defined social injustice, and talked about what a hero is and what they do and how they give to others. So that's where we're starting. We're starting with others, which fits directly into the empathy phase of design thinking.
Okay, I love that. And so you have the empathy, define, ideate, prototype, and test. Just today, I experienced a student who wanted to go from A to Z in a matter of about 3 minutes. He had a problem. He said, I have it solved, and it wasn't ever a problem to begin with. He was looking at a text that a visual text we were analyzing, and instead of thinking through the process of analyzing it, he instead just wanted to fix things, be done with it, and move on. And so what I would have asked you, I guess, about your classroom, what about engagement? At this point in the school year, do you notice with this new approach that you're kind of experimenting with, have you noticed that students are engaged in conversation about these topics of whether it's the Justice League or justice and injustice or the text or that sort of thing? Is it different than last year?
Well, this particular stage that we're in involves them doing a lot of reading because in the empathy phase, ideally, you're interviewing people, which would be much more engaging. But we are just reading to see what's happening in the news. So, like currently today, they have an assignment that they have to do. They're about to be put in groups where they compare notes. So I don't know that the empathy phase and for this particular project is probably the most engaging thing that I've ever done, just to be totally honest with you, because it just requires them. It requires nose in the computer, reading, finding out what's happening in the news. Now, they are asking a lot of questions because they're having a really hard time understanding what social injustice is. So that's, and I told Kate earlier that I had a student who said, hey, a tree fell on a family in Central Park. Is that social injustice? So that's kind of what I'm dealing with right now, is really trying to get them to wrap their minds around social injustice. So they are engaged, they are reading, and they're asking questions, which is what I want them to do.
And that's a big part of that first stage, I would think, correct?
Right.
So in my classroom, we're about to be reading a book by Melba Patillo Bills, and it's a text titled Warriors Don't Cry, and it has a similar theme in terms of the thematic concept of justice and injustice, and it's all about the Little Rock Nine, the integration in 1958 of the Central High School in Little Rock, in the city of Little Rock School District. And in that context, one challenge for me or for my students that I'm thinking about is challenging them to create a perfect environment, or their idea of what would be the ideal environment for integration. Because clearly, with the governor's disapproval at that time and much of the local culture's disapproval of the integration of the Little Rock Nine African American students into the predominantly white school, the situation was not ideal for those students. And so Melba Beals, in her memoir, goes through the struggle that she experienced, threats on her life, the struggles of the other 9 or other 8 students, and then the consequences throughout their lives that they have dealt with in an agonizing way for so long. And so how would you recreate that? And so eventually, makerspaces might include the building of some physical object that would reconstruct an actual school building that might look different than the school did at Central High. Another thing that could be done in offering students possible prototypes, and from what I understand, you really don't want to give students too much because you don't want to fill their minds with what they should do.
Right.
But instead, from what I understand, right, Michelle, that you want them to come up with their own solutions to things.
Yes.
But you could suggest the idea of maybe a political type song to rally the masses, to get people to be supportive of the integration concept and the idea of freedom and liberation for so many Americans across the country who were being withheld from the same type of free public education and a high quality public education that so many others had the privilege to accept or to have.
And I really like this idea that you have for this book, because they have to empathize not only with those students, but also just think about all the people involved in the plan that they would have to create in order to implement that well. The mayor's office, you got PR, you have
another great idea.
Law enforcement. I mean, there's so much that would have to go into making that a smooth transition.
So some kind of a political statement or a political plan to get
Yes.
that accomplished in addition to those other two. And so the ideas could just keep on spiraling into good directions. And so if you could spark that, maybe sometimes with the example prototype, or at least try to get the students think about, we're talking about change. We're talking about coming up with new ways to accomplish something or to change the ways that were less successful.
And I think that teachers kind of tend to underestimate students sometimes, and I know that I do on occasion whenever I think, they're going to need a list of possible prototypes. They're not going to be able to come up with anything. Like, what are they going to do? And then, I give an assignment. I just give the challenge, and they already are starting to think of prototypes as much as I'm trying to pull them back all the way to empathy. But they're yelling, how will I do this? Am I going to do a comic book? Am I going to make an action figure? What am I going to do? And they're just so excited about the prototype part. And so you do kind of have to hold them back to that empathy. But the empathy and the research part is such an important step. But I know going into that prototype that they're going to have so much fun and be very much engaged and so proud of what they come up with.
Yeah, that's great. And so we think about the types of spaces that you might need to accomplish that. And I think Dan answered some questions on that pretty well in what he included on his cart. But again, if I were the one who's trying to teach someone based on my very inexperienced degree of knowledge about this, it really doesn't start with the stuff. It starts with the mind and starts with getting those thought processes started among your students. So if you can accomplish that, then it seems like all of the creative, hands-on type applications of that, they should just come streaming.
Right. I have been so blown away by listening to Dan, collaborating with Kate and with Teresa, and the possibilities of what you can do in ELA. Because I'll just be honest with you, whenever I first heard makerspaces, I thought, how am I going to bring that to the English classroom? Oh, they can build a globe theater, and that is nowhere near what it is that we want our students to do. We want them thinking critically. We want them digging for information. We want them to empathize with other people and do all of these things that fall into our curriculum that is meaningful, and it's not just a craft project.
It's all about the process.
Yes.
And so many classrooms, including our own at various times in the past, have been much more built around outcomes and products instead of the process. So that's where we are.
That's where we are.
So now it's time for
hashtag the struggle.
I haven't had any, have you?
Oh, no struggles at all. It's been completely smooth sailing.
Of course, just like any beginning of a school year. By the way, you got that online course done? No. Have you contacted these students? I didn't know they were my students.
Is your Blackboard set up? Not quite.
What about Grade Center? Oh, man.
Remind me what I did a year ago to get set up for Grade Center, because I don't remember how I set that up that one time a year ago.
You remember our last podcast? It feels like it was
forever ago.
But the reason it hasn't been last week or this week is just because it's all about hashtag
the struggle.
So we are thankful for Dan Ryder for joining us in today's conversation, answering a lot of questions that we had, and many of them we didn't even have to ask. Dan was
he was
perfect.
Chatty, perfectly chatty.
Just like the typical improv teacher.
Yeah.
So what an amazing guy, and we hope that one day we get to have him back.
Right. Thank you, Dan.
Also, we definitely want to let you know that on our website at acrossthehallpodcast.com, we've included not only our show notes, but also an extended version of the interview with Dan Ryder. he had all kinds of really terrific things to say that just we weren't able to squeeze into the time frame that we had for today's episode. So make sure you go there and check that out, and like him on Twitter, as well as go buy his book.
So thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.
Bye.
Don't forget to stop by acrossthehallpodcast.com for the show notes and join the Across the Hall conversation on Twitter at #XTheHall. We hope you join us next time as we talk about tools teachers can use for digital annotation.